morning.
All right, we are calling the March meeting of the Information Technology Advisory Commission to order. We have a quorum, and we have a wonderful agenda this evening. I will pause here and see if we have any public comment. No public comment. I did send out the draft minutes for January and February. Did folks have a chance to look that over? I know I got it out a little bit late. Okay. We will, I like people to have a chance to look at it since it's the official record. So we'll pause. We'll table the motion to adopt until next month. Chair's update. The only real update I have is that we are working with libraries to schedule our second annual Tech Commission Book Club for September. And we are seeking suggestions for potential books and or authors that we'd like to have. Libraries is doing what they did for us last year, which is also reviewing what's on the market from their perspective. But if we have any recommendations, we should make them. The other item is that we are still on track for our AI conversation next month. I've received one input, right? Next month. Cyber next month. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you, sir. Cyber next month. We're still collecting inputs for the questions we'd like to ask the county on AI strategy and implementation. I've got one set of inputs. So again, looking for suggestions, framing questions of things we're interested in that we'd like the county to cover for us when they brief us on their AI strategy. That's all I have for the chair's update. On to our first agenda item, performance parking.
You share this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, one piece of administration. Andrea, can you tell us whether you are participating remotely for personal or medical reasons and where from?
So I probably, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I probably did this wrong because I thought it said hybrid but I guess it's hybrid if you're sick. I mean, I'm under the weather, but I'm not like, I don't want to be around anybody and get anybody else sick. But I'm at home here in Arlington.
That sounds like medical reasons to me. The chair approves. Thank you very much. And Jackie's joining. She had already asked for approval. Jackie, you made it in just under the wire. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Yeah, I was just getting verbal confirmation where you were participating from for the record.
I am at home.
Great, thank you. All right, now to Melissa for our performance parking update.
Thank you very much. My name is Melissa McMahon. I'm parking and curb space manager for Arlington County. And I will be presenting to you what will be my third update to this particular body on the performance parking pilot project in commercial corridors. I will go over some of the basics though, because not all of you have heard me present prior to this on this project. Let's see which. There we go. So overall, the purpose of this project is to make metered parking spaces more available more often through pricing and information. And ultimately, by doing that, to hopefully reduce the negative impacts associated with the search for metered parking. Those could be double parking, cruising for parking, erratic and dangerous driving behavior, extra VMT and emissions from search time for parking, and even going elsewhere to do business. What we're doing with the pilot is we're testing a new technology tool. And there's really a lot of different new technologies sort of bundled together in this project, but the key feature is that we are collecting space by space occupancy information for the first time. And I've got just a bit of a little flow chart here on the screen to show you what that looks like. We install these very small sensors into each metered parking space. We core drill, put it in the ground, epoxy over it so it's flush with the surface of the asphalt. And those sensors can tell when a car is there or not. So it's basically just car there, car not there, constantly 24/7, 365. And it sends that information to a network of gateways, which are mounted primarily on traffic signal poles. And those gateways communicate that information to the cloud. And when it gets to the cloud, available APIs, which are actually publicly available and open through both the county's open data portal as well as on our website, allow people to use the information from our sensors for a variety of things. And we use it for both internal analysis and for displaying the information to the public. So to date, we're a couple of years into this project overall. It took about a year from project startup in the fall of 23 to get all the sensors in the ground. So the sort of hardware process all the way to the spring of 24, March of 24 was when we received board approval for the ordinance update that lets us do administrative price changes for our meters. Prior to this, price changes for meters really only happen through a budgetary process. And so we got the permission to make these changes on a no more frequent than quarterly basis based on the data that we're collecting. And so the price changes, when they happen, are communicated out to the public in a packet of information that looks like this. So we update all the data to the meters. Park Mobile has updated data and information, and there's a price change packet of information that explains to people what occurred and why. And the general criteria we're using, without getting into great detail, is when spaces are more than 80% full, they're candidates for an increase in price of 50 cents. And when they're less than 40% full, they're a candidate for a decrease in price of 25 cents. And we are only focused on peak hour analysis and activity. So when we recommend a price change, it's not going to be for the entire day unless the entire day is representing peak activity. So when we do these changes, and the way the maps are showing here, it's showing you that in any given neighborhood, there's going to be a different price on the curb by time of day according to its utilization. So this is Clarendon at 9 a.m. Most of the rates in Clarendon are either $1.75 to $2.25 an hour, or even lower at $1 to $1.50 an hour. By the time you hit noon, a bunch of parts of Clarendon go up to $3.25 to $3.75 an hour. This is 5 price changes into the project. We've been doing this for about a year. And there are some sections at $2.50 to $3 and so on. So you can see at noon and at 6 p.m., it's a pricier place to park. And those variations are provided so that in theory, we can influence behavior using price and information. We've done a bunch of different kinds of things to let people know about this. And I'm just highlighting a few in this presentation. In the fall, I did a training down at the Lover Run Community Center for the 55 Plus program, explaining the basics of the project, but also how people can use different tools to see this information, how they can use right now. And I think you can still use Park Mobile as an availability layer. They will be discontinuing that layer because for their business purposes, it's not in their base bottom line. So they won't keep it around for us, even though we beg them. But it was for a long time showing an availability layer so people could see whether parking spaces were full or not. We have an app that's available through our pilot. And we also have tools online that people can use to visualize, tools that are developed by county staff. We've done outreach in person with pop-ups at events like Clarendon Day. We also, I wanted to cover, we had a really fun Code the Curd data hack event back in the fall. We basically put an open invitation out to regional professionals and students saying, hey, we've got this open data source. It's an events API as well as curb and sort of regulations APIs that complement it, that tell you what's going on. How would you use this information? How would you use it as an individual driver? How would you use it to communicate to others? And we had a full Saturday really of eight presenters, over 40 attendees. There was some pizza provided by not the project budget, just for the record. And it was great. It was great. We've had some opportunities to sort of reflect on what we were learning, but a lot of it was also just the feedback we got that, one, it's really fun to have open data from the county, and there's a lot of interest in using it more. And there were folks who attended who really just came up to our comms folks and said, hey, can we do this again with other types of data that the county provides? And a lot of excitement about the prospect that parking availability could be an additional data point on people's travel planning course. And since we're so far in, I wanted to share with you some occupancy information, well, data in general, some data analysis. I'm going to cover a few different types. And just due to time, I'm not going to cover everything, but I do encourage you to ask me questions, and we'll see what we do. This is a pretty basic chart showing change over time in occupancy by neighborhood. And the color coding from left to right is pre-price change in gray, otherwise known as baseline period before last March. And then it goes first price change period in blue, second price change period in green, third price change period in yellow, fourth price change period in orange. And so it's just showing you by neighborhood. And so in some respects, there's a trend over time of a decrease. That's not necessarily something we want to see keep going down over time, because overall, we actually want to shift demand in a couple different directions depending on the type of block. But it's also helpful here to just see the difference by neighborhood, because some neighborhoods have more demand challenges than others. Most notably, Ballston and Pentagon City have different kinds of pressures than the other neighborhoods in the community. This is another visualization attempting to describe central tendency. So what we're showing here are box plots, and there's two sets. The orange set are of the block faces that received increases in price. And so you can imagine that the orange, the blocks, parking blocks that live in these orange boxes are the ones that are over 80% full and warranted an increase. In the blue boxes, it's the parking block faces that were less than 40% or in between. Basically, they got no increase, they had nothing, they had no changes, or they had decreases in price. And the decreases are a much smaller population. So in the grand scheme, we want to see the orange boxes shift the most, and we expect them to shift the most because, again, we're increasing by 50 cents each time. We're only decreasing by 25 cents, and the pool of spaces with no change or decrease is quite a bit larger. So it'll be harder to shift that. And we're kind of seeing a suggestion that we're moving in the right direction with those orange boxes, bringing the averages, which are the X's, and the medians of central tendency of occupancy down steadily as we go. This is another box plot visualization. This is focused on the peak time occupancy rates. This prior one is all metered hours for the entire project area, and this is peak time times only for the project area. And similarly, we think we're seeing this move in generally the right direction. Here's another visualization of peak time occupancy change. And I thought it would be fun to just show that we can see this geographically. And if you look at this very broadly, the reds are block faces, areas with a block face average of greater than 80% occupancy during their peak times. The grays are in a maybe happy medium area of 60 to 80%. And for reasons of cutoff, blues are showing as less than 60% occupied. And the left-hand chart is our baseline period. And the right-hand chart is the most recent price change period that we have analysis for, which is the fourth price change. And you're seeing less red and you're seeing more gray. And those are good things. If we can keep this trend going, we want to see less red and we want to see more gray. We don't particularly want to see more blue. Ideally, we just even things out more and we actually shift people into those blue areas. Here's another way we're experimenting with visualizing project activity in progress. This is a peak time availability map between 10 and 2 p.m., 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. in Ballston. And what we're showing here, baseline on the left, similar to the other, and most recent period on the right, is all these block faces split into essentially two buckets. A block face where if you showed up, there'd be less than 2 parking spaces available, and a block face where if you showed up, there'd be 2 or more spaces available. And we're using this as a metric, and I'm looking interested in your feedback on this, and we'll talk about some other areas of important feedback. But we want to talk about project progress or change or achievement or non-achievement based on things that the community might actually care about. So instead of just talking about occupancy, we're attempting to help people imagine that more spaces are blue in the current condition than there were before, more block faces, meaning if you drive up to them, you're more likely to find a space because there are 2 or more spaces available on average during the peak hours, during these, I call them afternoon peak hours in this neighborhood, compared to the prior condition. So again, based on a metric like this, mapped like this, we seem to be going in the right direction. We are seeing more blue block faces and fewer of the gray block faces. Another area of analysis I wanted to share with you is a specialty set. We did not do any price changes for ADA parking spaces until just this last price change, which occurred earlier this month. We waited a full year and we conducted some analysis on the data behind it because we made a commitment to stakeholders and leadership that we wouldn't do anything rash with these spaces since they're important assets for a subpopulation of the community. What we can see is that the ADA spaces are far less occupied on average than the rest of the spaces in their respective neighborhoods. So this kind of makes sense because the population that needs them is a lot smaller. There are also a lot fewer of these spaces. But generally speaking, this was a good sign that we weren't seeing any crazy levels of occupancy for the spaces on average in the neighborhoods, and it's a lot less. And I say good because we want these spaces to be available. We want them to be accessible to the folks that need them. We also did a rate comparison, a sort of gut check, because we have been changing prices on blocks for a year now. And we noticed that there are a few spaces, and this is a little hard to see, but where you see little red dots, those are ADA spaces whose price is higher than their accompanying regular block. And that is an artifact of the fact that the block upon which they sit has had prices go down on it relative to the ADA space, and we haven't changed the ADA space price. So as a result of that, our recommendation in this March change, which went into effect on the 10th, actually included reductions in price for those spaces to make them even with the rest of their blocks. So they actually got price decreases for that specific purpose. Another way we're using these data to understand ADA space use is to compare the utilization of the space to the rest of its relative block. So this is a very similar map, but it's talking about a different feature, and it's comparing ADA space use to non-ADA space use on the block and indicating where, when the ADA space is used more highly, we might need to look into why. Because it could be that there's a high population of users with placards who need that space all the time. It could be land use based, or it could be that they're being abused. And there are folks parking in these spaces that are not actually properly placarded. So we use analysis like this to hone in on places where we can do additional field work to understand better what's going on. And then the final in this little thread of analysis that I want to share is that we were also looking at ADA non-compliance from the sense of comparing occupancy and citation data. And so what I mean by that is the chart on the left is showing in the blues and the reds numbers of citations that have been issued by the police department over the calendar year of 2024. And with the reds being the highest numbers on those blocks and the lightest blues being the lowest numbers. And if there's no color, there's actually no ADA citation being issued. We've also got highlighted a couple of those highest occupancy ADA spaces in yellow or gold. And if you overlay the two, if you've got a high occupancy ADA space on a block that has no or very low citations, there might be an opportunity there for better enforcement or for making enforcement aware that there could be an issue. And I'm calling out here on the right-hand picture the fact that in 2024, we installed new meters and an accessible parking space down on the very end of Wilson there before it hits the more restricted access roadway. And it had not received any citations at all in 2024, but it had an 81% average peak time occupancy. And as a sort of side note, 35% payment compliance. So there's the sense from the data that enforcement there could well be warranted because it's likely that people figured out the enforcement staff didn't know it was there and they were just using it all the time for other things. So we were able to use this type of analysis to call out this information to support a more evidence-based sort of information-based parking enforcement targeting. And so that brings me to conversation slide. And then I'll wrap up the slides and we'll come to this topic. But I really wanted to highlight for you all that one of the biggest challenges we have with this project is that we are working with technology for decision support, but we're working on decisions that both are happening internally by staff and up through the leadership of the county, as well as decisions that happen every day by parkers. And our project has information provided to all of those kinds of stakeholders. But what we're seeing over and over again is that the people in the community parking in the spaces they're not downloading the apps, they're not using our online tools, they're not aware of the project at all. They've become more and more aware of the prices because when they park and it's a really expensive block face at that particular time, if they flag it, sometimes we get that feedback through there's a useful sort of real-time parking experience pop-up that Park Mobile will hit you with. If you park in our project area roughly once a quarter now, they're trying to get people with it. And the pop-up basically says, are you happy or not with your parking? And when we get open comments on that, a lot of them are about Park Mobile's app not being very good. But then there's a bunch that are about, this is an exorbitant, extortionary price, you shouldn't charge this. And then there's a bunch that are like, this is fine, and I like parking. So there's very few, if any, seem to know that they could be parking a block away and it would be half the price. A really good example of that, I don't have a visual for you, is that our highest price area in the community right now is in Ballston, and it's about a block away from the garage. Ballston Public Parking Garage charges $1 for the first 3 hours of parking. And people are yelling at us madly when they park at the $4.25 an hour spaces on the street that are a block away. But it's a real disconnect in information, right? And I don't want them to be mad, and I don't want them to pay $4.25 an hour. In fact, the reason it's so expensive is because they're trying to park there too often, and we need them to shift their demand to other places. But we do struggle to find ways to raise awareness. And I featured on the screen some examples. We've started installing real-time information displays out on the street that are actually up in the right-of-way on a traffic signal pole. We've had 2 up since roughly October, November, and we've been experimenting with the layout of them and the way that it's showing information. As we get feedback from the public and we think about it with our project team, we're going to be rolling out 8 more of those this spring. As soon as those suckers ship here, we're waiting for the supply. And when we roll them out, they'll be in different neighborhoods. They might be slightly different layouts, but the goal is to obviously direct people to cheaper parking and available parking, but also to raise awareness that there are choices. We have emailed out to 150 businesses that are on our contact list for the project the offer of doing a tailored parking map for their business. Just like we make the map for you, we'll put your name on it, we'll format it nicely, we'll show you so you can show your customers where the cheaper blocks are. We've got 0 hits No one has expressed interest in us doing this for them. We post signs on traffic signal poles, like at pedestrian level, telling people about it. We actually just pulled the trigger on a neighborhood mailing. We've done, it's, I don't remember how many households we're hitting, but we just decided we're going backwards and away from tech to not tech, because we literally need to put a piece of paper in people's mailboxes that has a picture of the map and talks about the project, and maybe it will get them, if not to download an app, to at least know they actually do have choices on the street. The next time they go to the streets there and they park, they can think, oh yeah, this is one of the high spots. Maybe it's cheaper a block away. So we're really, we're spending a lot of time thinking about this, and I'd love to hear from you all, your thoughts, your philosophy around what's important here or not, or if you have any strategies you think that we haven't used that we should be using, because when it comes down to it, the make or break, I think, for what the magnitude of effectiveness we can have has a lot to do with people's awareness of their options. It's not everything, but it's going to be a lot. Yeah.
So I guess your program really speaks to parking spaces on the street, rather than you just mentioned people who are maybe paying $4.50 on the street parking, yet a block away there's a parking garage that's a dog for the first 3 hours.
Yep.
Is that being publicized as part of this, or because it's a private parking garage, is it excluded from the picture yet?
Right.
That's an option.
So we've done a couple things in that regard. One is we added to the ExactNav app tool that's part of the project. We've started adding the off-street parking assets. Now, we don't have real-time occupancy data for them, but we just put static price and hours type of information. So if you're looking in Crystal City, for instance, there's a lot of off-street parking asset there. That's just as convenient, if not more so, than the street parking. So you can click on those and you can pop them up in the app if you use them. We will be rolling out signs in neighborhoods that have just as much garage asset as street asset. So the examples would be when we put them up in Pentagon City, when we put them up in Crystal City, and in Ballston, all of those will have signs that say garage in some way and are pointing people to it. But again, we'll be experimenting because the signs only have so much real estate. So we can't say Fashion Center Mall garage. We'll probably have to just say garage. So
Well, you also had hope that it would be able to include pricing information so that they know it is advantageous.
Yep.
Because if you're, I don't
Yep.
drive into the DC that much, but
Right.
you have no idea if 2 blocks away, there's one parking garage that has an early bird, especially you're paying way too much where you want. If you
Yep.
don't know that information, you just say, to hell with it, I'm gonna park it.
Yeah, and we don't want people to be afraid of that. So this is one of the challenges, especially because the garages often have more convoluted price structures.
Right.
It's like there's an hourly rate for the first couple hours, and then it goes to an all-day rate really fast. And so we might not be able to capture all of that, but this is one of the goals, is to increase the awareness of those off-street assets, especially the Ballston Public Parking Garage is run by the county. It's underutilized, and it's right in the middle of one of the most high demand sets of blocks that we have. So if we can get people to try it, they will find, this is incredibly cheap and incredibly convenient. And maybe they can get over the fact that there's also a predisposition for people that not like garage parking. So we have to get over that hurdle too. I don't know which is worse, parallel
Because I
parking on the
think
street. or
At Boston, though, you have to go up several floors before because they
That's
have all the
correct.
monthly permits.
The monthly permits are at the bottom. I don't know who made that decision once upon a time. It's a
Right.
really weird decision.
Yeah.
Not something that I don't change, but yeah.
I suspect you said you weren't getting any hits from businesses when you volunteered to do, maps. And I suspect that's because the businesses don't want to be tarred with being associated with the perception on the part of people that, your pricing is going to be more expensive than it had been. So,
Yeah, I mean, that could be.
they don't want to be too associated. My question is, if Park Mobile is not going to be in the future a pricing method, how does the average person on the street who has not yet gotten the app who just, wants to use a parallel parking space, how do they pay?
Well, Park Mobile will continue to offer payment. What they're not doing, what they did as a part of this project and what they will not continue to do is show the availability.
I see, I see,
Yeah, so
I see.
Park
But
Mobile
you
is going
still can
away.
pay by
You can
parking.
still pay. And what we're trying to do is do some things to like, okay, maybe we can get our app to be able to direct people to their Park Mobile app. After they've picked the area and they click on something, it can pop them to Park Mobile. And but there's not a whole lot of integration across providers like this. They did not design their technology to get along well with each other. They're trying to be more self-sufficient so that they're the ones that everyone chooses. But the bummer was that Park Mobile didn't find a value proposition for themselves in providing this data. It might change in the future, but
What's the usage statistics? Like how many users are you getting hitting the APIs on a daily basis?
it's almost for you. The downloads for the ExactNav app are in the hundreds, which is not a lot when you've got tens of thousands of transactions of parking happening all the time. And the impression we have been given by Park Mobile on the utilization of their layer, the availability layer, is that it's also not very high.
Right.
The trick is the folks, jurisdictions like ours that have availability to even display are few and far between, right? Compared to all the jurisdictions that we offer services in.
Yeah, I'll be honest, everybody I've talked to has been amazed at how forward-thinking Arlington is in doing this and completely unaware that it was available until I talked to them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That is
my
my experience too.
one-man grassroots campaign is not,
I know.
not cutting it.
That is how we feel. Like we feel like, well, I guess I would say it seems to be revealed to us that people are perhaps overloaded with information.
Right.
They don't want more apps. They don't want more decisions. They'd ideally just like to drive somewhere and find a spot. And so one of the trade-offs we've talked about, we've gotten a couple pieces of advice to indicate this on the meters or on the signs, high price, low price, physically on the signs when people get there. And there's a lot of merit in that kind of concept. However, it doesn't get drivers out of the habit of circling around.
Right.
Because if you don't know where the low price spaces are, you're still looking for the sign that has the blue sticker on it instead of the sign that has the red sticker on it, and you're still doing the search.
I'll be honest, I'm price insensitive. I know not everybody's price insensitive, but when it comes to parking, I care more about my time
Right.
looking for the spot and the certainty that there will be a spot available,
Right.
than I care about whether it's $4.25 an hour or $3.25. Like my time's worth more than $2, right? The difference between the spots. So,
That plays into something I was going to ask you. Are the price differentials enough to incentivize behavior change? I know when I drive in DC, I'm very price conscious because the prices are much larger. The different $2.
right.
What do I care?
Yeah, I think,
But 4 1/4, I'm not a buyer at 4 1/4.
I think-
I'll walk a block or two.
But if you were in DC and you saw 4 1/4 an hour, you'd leap for it.
I think that, yeah, I think the
I would
demographics
park at 4 1/4 there.
that you're dealing with for street parking are more likely to care about their time and the availability than they are necessarily the pricing. And so the sales pitch of download this app to find cheaper parking is probably not the right pitch. It's download this app to save time.
Well, if I may add, there's another factor that may not apply for you younger folks, but for me, the factor is how far away is it? So what I'm looking for is a space that's within a block, because either it's a handicap spot or it's a space within a block. So, because to me, it's like, where can I find a space where I can walk to where I need to go? And if I can't find a space in that area, I can't go.
Mm-hmm.
And so distance is way more important to me than cost.
Mhm. Yeah, and, yeah, please.
No, so I was gonna say those signs, right? I think I'm kind of on the same boat with the insensitivity to the price, but just knowing the availability probably helps, right?
Mhm.
Like, even without having those signs, I'm usually finding the parking spot and then seeing how much it costs.
Mhm. Yep,
And I think at that point, I'm either
that's when
pay it
they
or
pull,
not.
they pull up their phone
Right,
after you
and
park.
at some point, once you parked, you're almost always going to stay there.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, in those blocks, can you tell exactly where the parking is, or do you have to circle around within that color? So you said there was a color that there will be two parking for that, or if it's yellow or something, there'll be like two colors within, two parking within that color, and then do you have to drive around for that two spaces, or?
Oh, in the other map,
Yeah.
it's showing how much.
Yeah.
So, so this is a map of price.
Mhm.
And so it's to give you a sense, the purpose of these, we thought, is to like pre-plan. If I go to Clarendon all the time and I'm going to, I don't know, someplace that doesn't have a garage, I was gonna say Trader Joe's, but I think they actually have. Then I can look at the map.
Yeah.
The time I typically go and say, oh, I'll try for that block instead. And to the lady online who was talking about distance, forgive me, I didn't catch your name.
It's
Jack.
Jackie. It's Jackie.
This map can also help give someone a sense generally if it's a block away difference, because in some parts of town, it is just a block and you'll get a different price, you'll get a cheaper price. But this other map, flip back to it, which we haven't used in a sort of social media or publicity sense yet because it's the beginning of another vein.
Mhm.
But this is that sense of, on the blue blocks, you could expect during the peak hour of activity for that block that there'll be 2 or more spaces available.
Mhm.
And the idea of 2 or more spaces is that if you're driving up, even if one space is, someone grabs it right before you, there's probably another space. So it's a high likelihood that you'll actually drive by and you'll see a space on that block you can use. Whereas if you aim for the gray blocks, and you might do that automatically, 'cause that's where you usually park, it is less than 2 spaces that are likely to be available on that block during peak time. So that could mean 1 space, it could mean less than 1 on average during those hours. So this would be a kind of availability version of that map to say, don't aim for the gray blocks, aim for the blue ones. And it happens that probably if I overlaid the price, we would find that those are cheaper blocks, the blue ones, maybe not 100% same amount cheaper, but because they're the higher availability, they're the ones that got less increases in their price and that sort of thing. So these would be the cheaper ones too.
Okay, so the conversation we have so far, it doesn't seem like people care about the price. They just want to know if I'm going to go to Whole Foods, I'm going to look, see what parking is available there. And maybe if I can click on one of those spots, it will take me there.
Mhm.
And then if that spot is not open, I can look at the map, see other spots. I'm going to click on the next closest spot and try to drive there to see if it's open.
Yeah, I think this brings up a point that I was going to ask about. Have you done any kind of usability research with folks who are actually using the app to see what the user experience is like?
No,
Because I think
we've talked about it.
I'm
But
one of your
Groups are expensive and hard. And
I'm one of your 100, so I
Yeah.
can represent 1% of your exact downloads.
Yeah.
The
It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. The flow of, I'm gonna go someplace, I'm gonna use the app to try and find parking, is I sit in the car, I look at where I'm going, I try and find something where close by that has a lot of parking available, because between the time I travel and get there,
Right.
what there's gone, right?
Yep.
And then when I get there, I'm like, is it still there? Is it, and then like, if it's not there, then I gotta go look, okay, where's, right? So that friction between what I normally use to navigate, which is just a navigation app,
Yep.
and the real-time availability and being able to update and say, I want to go to this place, but what I actually want is a parking spot near that place.
Yep.
Can my maps update in real time to pick my parking spot based on the real-time data? That's what I would want as a user. That's the experience that I think would sell.
Yeah.
I know that's really difficult with all the integrations and stuff, but
Well, and so as you probably experienced what we have now, and forgive me, I was just realizing I don't have a screenshot of the exact map to share you in detail. It's the background image on the left side here. But it looks a lot like Google. It uses teardrop pins to show you availability.
Yeah.
So red will be like a big old 0, but then green will be higher numbers, et cetera. And you can use it to navigate to an area or a specific space by clicking in and saying, I want to navigate to this block face, or I want to navigate to this space. And it pops you over to Google for driving directions, and you can do the normal turn by turn stuff through Google. And it has the ability to flag for you if the space goes away or not, or something comes up, but I don't know if it will adjust your navigation route based on that change, or if it just gives you a pop-up, which is not as helpful if you're driving.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's helpful feedback, and it is, I think, useful for us to think about how we could advise them on creating a better tool, for as long as that tool is in our pilot and that we're paying for it this way. But the county also can't pay for apps in perpetuity, right? So at some level, we also need the app companies to sort of take a hold of using data like these.
I'm speculating you can either confirm deny or no comment that the reason the availability later is going away is low usage, right?
That's our understanding.
If there was high usage, then it would be utility to their users.
Yep.
And in fact, I think if we could get high usage, we could probably get concessions from the vendors for availability of the data to support the program longer term. So I think the key for the future of this is broader awareness and adoption, more so.
Right. So how
Which-
are we going to do that? We've also gotten feedback that people just don't want to use apps when they're doing this kind of thing. Like, so in many respects, our price map, the nature of the street is not about the app. It's all there all the time, whether they pay on Park Mobile or not, or whether they pay at the meter in cash or credit card or not. They can always know, because we have ways for them to just look and know that there's different prices out there. But there's a lot of payment is happening with Park Mobile.
Yeah.
I think it's like 65 or 70% of the parking payment is happening with Park Mobile now.
Yeah.
So it isn't as though there isn't a lot of them using an app, but do they also want the other app? The other app.
Yeah, it's the navigation piece that I think, because by the time you're parked.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
Um,
on top of like the on streets, like the signs you guys have around too, like I'd rather just like reference that, like once I get in Arlington, like, oh.
Yeah.
I don't need an app.
Do you
I
see?
have another topic when you have availability.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
I'd like to raise it's related, but it's not what this pilot is doing. And that is the difference between retail parking and residential parking. We have a very significant issue related to residential parking overnight. And the county has a policy of basically including under parking as part of development planning. And it's part of wanting to reduce cars. But we are, as a result, getting locations where when a large building is built, we have parking wars in neighborhoods. And this is a very critical issue and is even livelihood related for some people. So, if you can't, if you live in a particular location and you can't find a place to park, you can't go home. And people are, yes, they're parking farther and farther away, but here's where how far do you need to go and where are the parking is a really critical piece of information that I could see people wanting to do. And people are being told, find a parking garage, or maybe find a parking garage and take the metro between parking garages, or, walk from another neighborhood, or, whatever. So people are trying to come up with all different solutions. But if you have to be at your job at, 7 in the morning, and you have to get to wherever your car is parked in order to get to your job, this is adding, a significant amount of time, because you don't know from one night to the next where you're parking and where you're leaving from the next day. So all of that to say, it may be that we don't have this as a huge demand everywhere, but we have an increasing demand by people in particular areas who want to know, where can I park overnight? And that is a huge issue. I mean, and if you talk to people in the Virginia Square area, particularly around the APA development, it's a battleground for spaces. So I don't know how you monetize that, or you suggest a business model that would make it so that you could pay for this. I mean, I don't know whether people would pay for it, and particularly this is happening in places that are designed for affordability. I mean, the building where we have one of the biggest issues is an APA, affordable housing building.
Yeah, so Jackie, if you don't mind, I'd love to speak to this a little bit. First, to say that there are pieces of this project that we're looking at potential impacts on residential neighborhoods to make sure that this project doesn't spill over. I had these couple slides as extra slides, but because we're talking about residential parking, I thought I'd pop them up. We designed a monitoring study to go alongside the work, where we've been doing periodic sampling of residential permit parking blocks that are immediately adjacent to our performance parking blocks. This is a map with the blue being our performance parking blocks and the red being RPP, with the idea that as we monitor over time, we want to make sure we can track if there's occupancy steadily going up in an area that might be being caused by us, by people being pushed because of price out of commercial parking areas where they belong into residential parking areas. This table gives you a very quick snapshot of all those data collected thus far, before the first price change in our baseline period, and then through the 4 price changes we've conducted. And at a high level, what this says is we aren't seeing an overspill problem. There's one street in North Utah Street where it was already high RPP occupancy before the project started, and it stayed high. It's inched up a little bit, but we actually have that street and then Wakefield are 2 examples where we're bringing it to enforcement's attention, and we're doing some of our own additional field work to see if the high occupancies for the trend, high occupancy in the case of Wakefield is going up, is actually people who aren't properly decaled and permitted, or if it's people who are permitted and decaled. There's just a lot of demand in that area. So we're doing some additional investigation on that, but it's one of those areas where we're sensitive to it. With respect to residents in apartment buildings, one of the nice things, at least, about our meter blocks is the meters only run from 8 to 8, and it's free overnight, and our occupancies are low overnight, and they're low all the way into the morning, and they're usually low all the way through 8 a.m. and then starting about, in some places maybe 9 or 10 it starts to go up, but very, very rarely is there any occupancy issue in the early mornings, which means, at least from an apartment building perspective, people who really wanted to come home at night, and admittedly after 8, or maybe you park at 6 and you pay a little bit but then you leave it there, could, in theory, park overnight, pick their car up at 8 in the morning on their way to work or before, and they'd actually be able to use a metered parking space for that. So there is a bit of shared use potential for residents who live in buildings that are near and on the corridor. This project doesn't do anything with the site plan approval process, but I'll say that, or I'd like to at least convey that it's never staff's intention to recommend an underparked building. It's staff's intention to recommend a data-driven minimum parking amount that doesn't generate more cars in the corridor and sufficiently provides the parking for the building. So that said, I'm aware of the APA building that you're talking about over in Virginia Square, and I'm aware of the challenges that have been faced there. And I do think actually that one of the things we're learning from that building is that affordable housing is different, because affordable housing residents do not have the same market flexibility that
They don't have, excuse me, they don't what?
They don't have the same like market flexibility. Like once they move in and they find that there isn't room for them to park in the building, they can't leave and go find a better apartment building because they were on.
Yes. And they weren't aware, I mean, in this particular case, you know, part of the issue was they weren't, and when you say it's not a policy, I mean, I guess I'm going to have to beg to differ on that. The data seems to be showing to us that there is, and the discussions that we have at site plan seem to be showing that there is an intention to get under parking. Let me just say that's what's resulting. So whether it's intentional or not is a different topic. But the people also were not aware that they weren't going to be able to get parking. And there was an assumption that of people who were in affordable housing would not need as parking as much. It was going to be lower. And this is despite the fact that in other areas, there have been studies that show that that access to a vehicle is one of the best ways of increasing people's income.
Yeah, so Jackie, we'll put a pin in this conversation because we're starting to veer into planning and housing.
Yes, I only wanted to raise this as a potential data source that could be used to look at and analyze other parking issues.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is just a takeaway slide. It covers everything that I've talked to you about. Our general sense of the occupancy data to date, our general sense of the ADA space use and the data to date and how we're using that information, the general sense about RPP data to date and how we're using that information to monitor change and potentially do additional field work and intervention as necessary. And then again, that the community is becoming more aware of price because the price is going up, but we're still struggling a lot on the awareness and use of our tools and information. So we continue to try new things to try to change that dynamic. But as we move ahead, we just did our price change number 5 in June. We'll do what may be our final price change number 6, because in the fall, we have to shift gears to re-engage the community on what we would have at that time as a proposed next ordinance, because the ordinance we're working under today sunsets in February of 26. And to get back to the board before that happens, we have to go through the request to advertise process and come up with that. We want to make sure we have a really strong engagement with the community on a proposed new ordinance in the fall. So we're aiming for September for that.
What is have we analyzed the impact on revenue yet?
The short answer is yes. There's been, particularly going into this budget proposal, there were estimates made for the revenue for this coming year so that they could take that into account, because we always have to create a revenue estimate alongside our expense estimates.
I know in the original framing of this, that was expressly not a thing to change the amount of revenue. Have we changed the amount of revenue?
We have. We're making more revenue than we were last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much?
I don't have that number.
Okay.
Sorry.
Of course.
We
and I want to point out that the reason we didn't want to put it at, well, it's not a performance target or goal,
right?
But the more effective we can be at moving people, the more likely that it's revenue neutral,
right,
or it's relatively modest. We're also starting from, in theory, underpriced curb space.
Right.
So as we move up, and as others have mentioned, people aren't price sensitive. We're not getting the shifts to the lower cost areas, and people are willing to pay more.
Have we improved or increased enforcement? Or do we have data around enforcement or the impact on enforcement?
We are, to date, there's been we have not been able to arrange for specific targeted enforcement actions as a result of our data. We have a dashboard. We've done coordinated meetings with police to make them aware of areas. Again, when it comes to meters, where enforcement might be more productive. The challenge is they are immensely understaffed. They can't even fully staff 2 shifts in a day. You know, their parking enforcement staff have a morning shift and an evening shift, and only one of those is properly staffed. So
Becoming even less price sensitive. No.
So, right. But we're trying to give them tools, and we talked about ADA, we talked
Right.
about RPP,
Yeah.
tools to target strategically enforcement where it can help. And we're trying to work on what is possible with the staffing they have. And they're continuing to try to staff up and to keep those folks in place. But they're also, we talk about technology solutions that might make enforcement more effective in the future.
Sure. Last question. What's,
Dealing with the sensors, for
Yeah.
example.
what, actually, second to last question.
Yeah,
What's
I just have one, I just want to make a final point. And that is, number one, I think this is great data and very useful on a number of points which we've discussed and that should be pursued. So it's because it's great data that I want to add the recommendation that we consider a similar pilot as a way of getting better data to understand the dynamics of residential parking, which is another area of concern where we need to better understand what those dynamics are and how they affect housing.
Yep. I will ping back to your leadership here for this commission. A different bureau actually does performance monitoring studies for site plan projects after they've been open. And part of that data collection is parking related, trip generation related, and mode split related. You all might be really interested in a future presentation on that. I don't know where they are with data collection over the years and that kind of thing, but I think that would be a good segue into your concerns about the data around residential parking.
What's the remaining, or what's the budget for continued marketing?
We're not running out yet.
Okay.
I mean, we just keep amping it up. That's why, for instance, the mailer, I think it's probably, it was like a $5,000 expense to do the particular set. What we did is we targeted several equity emphasis area neighborhoods, which actually overlap. I don't know if the county recently released a vulnerability index map. And that vulnerability index map creates a different, perhaps more nuanced set of mapping tools to target areas based on various factors that are demographic. And we did some overlay of those 2 types of maps to target these neighborhoods, because we figured if we're gonna spend money on mailing, we want to send it out to the households that may be the most price sensitive, and maybe they will care enough to take a look at the map and maybe make some decisions based on it. So that's where we started. But we can continue to do mailing and other things to reach.
Are the sensors already installed in all the places that you wanted to install? What percentage is left to be installed in the sensors?
We're at like high 90% of all the project areas. So we have about 4,600 sensors in the ground, and we are maximally covering all of our areas. They get dug up by construction projects, by utility company work in the streets. So periodically we have gaps appear that we then have to decide if we can backfill or not. And we do sort of strategic planning around where backfilling makes sense and how quickly we can do it based on what kind of project it is. But we are very, very high coverage. Yeah.
Do they see through the snow? I was parking on one of the spots and I'm like, I wonder if the sensors.
I think they would probably pretty easily see through a little bit of snow, but a snowbank, I don't know.
Yeah.
We did exclude from our most recent analysis for the price change, the couple weeks of crazy snow event, so that we weren't using weird data to make that price recommendation.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you see changes in patterns based on the seasons or
We
Time
think
of
we
year.
are, but we have just entered the first point at which we could see seasonal change, like 1 quarter over year. So we think we are starting to see there's some drop in activity that matched a lower period of activity in that season last year, so we would expect an increase over the summer, and we might start to see that. But yeah, our transaction data that we've had for years and years does suggest there's seasonal variation that we'll be able to see in occupancy as well.
A couple other wild cards too, return to office and then layoffs. So it's
Yes, and our project cannot control for any of that.
Yeah, so the reason I asked the question before was that, I just thought this sensor thing is only a pilot thing. It hasn't been really 90% complete. I thought it was like maybe 10-20% complete because I'm not aware of seeing any of those advertisements to download this new app or see anything related to the sensors. Yeah. So I think marketing might be your.
Right, we have to figure out the marketing.
Yeah.
Whatever marketing works for the sort of thing. Yeah. But if you park in any metered parking space in 2 Metro Rail corridors, you should see a sensor in the ground and you should see decals on the meters and signs like
we got the hangers on a lot.
We've got hangers on meters. We've got, and that's anywhere in our Metro Rail corridors.
What about this parking right here by the courthouse?
Yep, that whole lot is sensitive.
Yeah,
any of those spaces.
I saw the sign for the mobile parking, but it doesn't have.
Yeah, there isn't information about the pilot
but
program, is there?
It's on the meters, the meter boxes, but there isn't like a big sign about it. There are, because the lot is a lot, there aren't meters at every frontage of it, but the meters have decals on them and the sensors you can see in the back. So you'll be able to, when you go out, you'll be able to see now. And once someone's told you about it, you'll look and you'll notice the little circles.
Because just today, for example, just tonight, for example, I parked in front of the CVS out there and used Park Mobile and didn't notice any kind of signage. And day before yesterday, ditto, when I was parked in front of the Trader Joe's in Clarendon.
No pop-ups in your Park Mobile for happy or not with your parking experience?
I did get one of them, and but you typically ignore that. I mean, you do because you want to pay and park and go.
Right. Yep.
You don't want to do what appears to be a survey.
Right. No, totally. And a lot of people think that's coming from the Park Mobile vendor and not from us. But it is.
I did.
It is funny because if you click through and you click on it, there is somewhere in the message go here for more information about the project. And that does pop up quarterly, no more than quarterly, for anyone who's parking in these areas. So if you park here regularly in it's not going to happen every time, but maybe 3 months from now, you'll get another one. But it's just
if you pay at the kiosk, you're not going to obviously get that.
Right. If you pay at the kiosk, you might see the decal. But again, totally. I mean, I'm hearing if you're not,
it's the problem.
If you don't,
Exactly.
It's going to be that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really hard to consume the info.
Has there been any local press media coverage of this?
There is. Arl Now has written about it several times. It gets covered periodically at the price change points by the TV media. I don't know what I don't consume these particular medias, but I get forwarded the articles when they happen.
Okay.
So
it used to be that you could put out a full page ad in the local newspaper.
Right.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Send press releases.
And the county puts in the Inside Arlington and the newsletters that come out from anyone who's subscribed to transportation newsletters, they'll put little plugs in there about the project periodically or about the price changes when they happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's somewhere there, but the reality is everyone has their tailored consumption pattern and what they weed out and filter out and what they pay attention to. And we're really struggling to get past that barrier.
You allowed to advertise inside commercial stores?
Inside stores. We've
Like in Trader Joe's?
We've not tried that. We've not tried that. We've talked about putting posters up in the libraries.
Well, I will tell you that none of us here are marketing professionals. So you probably shouldn't listen to us. And with that, I think we will leave it to you to
We're just spitballing.
what we're doing to continue working it. I think we'll send a couple follow-ups to get answers on the the revenue impact and like the usage data so we can see, because I think that really should be a performance metric going forward, right? It's not necessarily the parking utilization, but the information utilization as a leading indicator.
Yeah.
And any other follow-up questions that anyone wants to send to me, we can package up and get to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right. Tracy, do we have the call center, a time for the call center conversation, or should we push it?
I think we can make it fairly brief.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could do it.
All right.
Let's see, me get some slides up here. Okay. Let's see, let's get this presentation. Oh, better. Okay, so wanted to talk to you a little bit about the work we've been doing over the past year. So I'm going to touch mostly on call centers, briefly also on our Teams phone project because they're a little bit related. So quick context, because we all need to go in this Wayback Machine of remember before COVID when we worked differently, right? We had 16 call centers, still do, that are constituent facing. There are a couple other miscellaneous call centers in the organization that are in, but 16 different call centers from across different departments. At the time, county employees were all primarily working on site at ACG locations at these call centers, right? They were using a Cisco agent software solution to help with queuing calls and also help with some monitoring of the quality of service. But it was very dependent on physical handsets on desks, right? So that was our scenario. We saw the need for change, as most of you in this room, I'm sure did in your different companies. There was the growth of remote workers, of course, and even though we've got a return to work, we're still seeing a lot of hybrid situations with these call centers. Or some folks might work from home 1 or 2 days a week, or they rotate who's on site these days. So we still need some technology that accommodates remote work. We've seen a lot of advances in call center software capabilities. And then customer desired communication mechanisms have changed, kind of like the discussion we just had about parking and how do people want to be able to communicate? What's their platform of choice? So all of that we took into consideration when we started this project. It started in 2023 with a competitive bid process for product selection. We selected the 5.9 product, largely because it is one of the leading products in this space still, with the features that met a lot of our needs and requirements. Started project planning then in 2023. And then in 2024, we started with an internal pilot at our DTS call center that services staff, and went really well. And so we went forward with the implementation across call centers and completed all of that by the end of 2023. So what is that bias? What does it look like right now? First of all, we were able to eliminate a lot of the physical handsets on desks because it's a call center as a service product. And so folks answer within the software from anywhere. So it allows that sort of remote, hybrid, alternate site work for call center workers. Easy transfer within the software for one agent to another. If I'm not the right area of expertise and I need to transfer to you, that's super easy to do within the software. There are supervisor dashboards in this product that are much more elaborate and robust to allow supervisors to track these actionable stats, like what's our call wait time, what's our call length, what's our call abandonment rate, a lot of other stats that they have the ability to track within these dashboards that can actually be used for coaching for service standard setting to improve the service that we provide to constituents. So all of that is great. Those are benefits that we're seeing across the board. The last two bullets are of particular interest to me from a customer experience standpoint is the tool has the capability to integrate live agent chat on the web and text messages and email. So a customer can choose the way they prefer to interact with us among those platforms For the call center agent, it shows up in the same pane of glass. So I can see and monitor where customers are reaching out from and be able to respond in this fashion there. So that I think is really promising for moving forward with a lot of different platforms of communication. And then the second one, it positions us really to create a seamless experience, that handoff between potentially in the future an AI virtual agent and then a real person if folks are not able to get what they need out of the AI. So imagine on our website, at some point, we've got an AI virtual agent icon that you can ask your initial question there. Maybe you get the response you need, you're done. If you don't, it would have the ability to say, would you like to chat with the live agent, and a seamless transfer to bring that live agent into the chat. So it's less friction for the constituent that's trying to reach out to us. So it positions us well for that scenario down the road. And I think that's something that we can talk a little bit more about when we do the AI briefing for you all in a couple of months, sort of envisioning what that future looks like. Really briefly, just touching on the desk phone, Teams phone migration project. So again, pre-COVID, we had about 3,000 physical phones sitting on desks. They ran through our Cisco infrastructure. So we had all the hardware to support that, of course. And so what we've done with that is begun to leverage our Microsoft Teams phone product to allow calls to and from ACG staff from anywhere. So that is allowing us to eliminate the vast majority of desk phones and that associated infrastructure. And not all, I say vast majority because there are some places where we need shared phones or where the community might need access to a phone, those kind of things. So we're going kind of department by department and making sure we understand the use case scenarios in each of those departments and eliminating as many desk phones as we can, but keeping the ones where it's appropriate to do that. And the other great thing about Teams Phone is it integrates with our call center software so that an agent can see the current availability of any ACG staff member. So if I say, oh gosh, I really need to transfer you to somebody in such and such an office, I can see within the Teams application whether that person's available or in a meeting or out of office. So currently we're about halfway through that Teams phone migration. I think we've done about between 1,600 and 1,700 folks we've migrated over. And so far that's going pretty well. And so we're hoping to be able to get everybody else done over the next year. Some departments take a little longer than others because of trying to make sure that we understand their use cases. In some places, folks actually need a call tree. And so we're making sure that we're mapping those out properly as we go along. So it's pretty methodical. But I think this is going to put us again in a great place to be able to just take advantage of the features in this software to really make it a little more seamless in the future. So that's it. Just wanted you all to be aware that that work has been done with the call centers, that we're in the midst of the Teams phone migration. And so I think both of those things are really putting us in a great place to continue to evolve that experience in the future.
Do you have data yet on customer satisfaction?
Not yet, not yet. We do have one of the challenges with the software is making sure we're retaining enough data to track trends. And so we've actually just done an integration with Power BI so that we can map out some of those data trends and start collecting that. So I can bring that back to you all at some point too, so we can see how it's doing. Any other questions, thoughts for me?
When do you think you'll be completed with the migration?
So call center migration done. So that one is up and running. Team phone migration, I think we're slated to complete that in July of 2026. All right.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to highlight the things that the county is doing to do digital transformation on a regular basis. Because I think that often gets lost in the policy shuffle. But these things, I mean, that's a great capability transformation, right? Might not save a ton of money right up front, but I'm sure the performance levels and the flexibility that it provides the government will pay many dividends in the future. So thank you for that. Frank, all right, legislative update.
Hey, the FCC has opened up a new docket titled In Re Delete, 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 in which the agency seeks to comment on every rule, regulation, or guidance document that the FCC should eliminate for the purposes of alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens. So I think comments are, actually, it's on a pretty fast track. Comments I think are due next month. So it's,
Is this a project 2025 initiative?
I would guess.
The chairman is a project 2025.
It was the author.
Contributing author. So, you know,
It would seem-
adopting his agenda, the new chairman, Carr.
And seems to be doing a lot without needing votes too.
Right. Well, there may not be two
But-
Democratic
Right.
commissioners there next
Actually,
week. So
I'll
that-
be reporting on that here. The FCC updated its rules to enable alert originators to transmit silent wireless emergency alerts, WEAs, in certain situations. Silent WEAs can better protect the public and can reduce alert fatigue. I guess the idea, if you had an active shooter and people are hiding under desks or whatever, you don't want that tone going off with people, with the shooter know where people are, I guess. I guess they weren't able to do silent WEAs until this authorizes silent WEAs. The FCC at its meeting tomorrow will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking to safeguard the nation's next generation 911 NG 911 transition by ensuring the reliability and interoperability of NG 911 networks. And also at its meeting tomorrow, the FCC will consider a sixth further notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes to strengthen caller location accuracy requirements for wireless calls to 911. And finally, Democratic FCC Commissioner Jeffrey Starks announced that he intends to resign from the FCC this spring, which will leave the FCC with a 2-to-1 Republican majority on the FCC. Which I believe is.
They won't need to fire the other.
That's right. So I believe that will be a quorum and they can still transact business with it.
I have something to add to that, actually. New news today, ripped from today's headlines. The FCC was before the Supreme Court today.
I was going to report on that. I said,
Have you gotten the report from it?
I didn't get any good details, just that.
I got some sort of bottom line details. The Universal Service Fund, which some of you may be familiar with, it's basically a fee that's attached to your telephone bill. It's been going up and up and up. It used to be,
Pennies now.
It used to be pennies. Now it's 36% of someone's telephone bill. There was a constitutional challenge, or actually a statutory challenge, I guess. The Fifth Circuit struck down the whole Universal Service Fund structure as the FCC has implemented it, on the theory that the FCC had assumed too much responsibility, had done too much from what Congress had authorized it to do, and especially that it subcontracted administration of the Universal Service Fund to a Universal Service Administrative Company, USAC. So it was a question of whether the FCC had delegated too much authority either from Congress to the FCC or from the FCC to the.
And Congress had delegated its taxing authority to the FCC, which then in turn.
Any event, it was before the FCC, and interestingly, the current Justice Department arguing on behalf of the FCC, the Trump administration did continue the Biden administration policy of defending the Universal Service Fund as it currently exists. And so they were before the Supreme Court today, oral argument this morning. And I'm told, and there's a Washington Post article to this effect too, but I heard it from a colleague who was at the oral argument this morning, that it seems very likely that the FCC is going to win and that the Universal Service Fund in its current form is going to be upheld by probably at least 7-2 and maybe 9-0.
Interesting. And George Will did a column on it.
Seriously,
I think it was in Sunday's.
did not know that.
Which was it, anyway, he, likes to poke fun at some of these government programs. This was one that he did have some fun with.
The Universal Service Fund is a mess in that, and that it has grown so much, and it's such a large percentage of consumers' telephone bills these days, largely because like it's mostly landline telephone bills, and everybody's cuts
Going away. Yeah.
The solution, a solution would be to extend the contribution obligation to internet-based services and
That was
broadband
that-
services, but that's never gotten off the ground.
Yeah, I
So it
think-
is a mess, but it does not seem to be legal. It seems that the legal challenge to it will be denied.
Because I think before he became chairman, Brendan Carr had basically said that it should be extended to, I think, tech companies like Google. I mean, not just
So they'll still be able to try to
not
do
just
that.
broadband
if
providers,
they have
but
to do
to
it,
actual,
yeah.
actual content.
But the system will not be brought down by the Supreme Court decision.
Interesting.
All right.
That's all I have.
Anything for the good of the order or DTS?
I'm trying to keep it
additional,
non-political.
DTS update?
Holly sends her regards. She is spending some time with her family this week, so she will be back next month.
Great. Anything for the good of the order? Jackie, Andrea? Anyone else in the room?
Sure.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Good night, folks. Thank you very much. See you next month.
Thank you.
Doing cyber next month?
So if you have topics you want